Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar series. Today's presentation is about Forticlient and the Teleworker. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. Everyone's lines have been placed on mute, but you're welcome to submit a question through the Q&A window at any time, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will be recorded on demand and shared shortly after conclusion of our event. Everyone in attendance at the end of the webinar will be receiving a DoorDash gift card to their registered email address. Now I'll go ahead and pass things over to Fortinet Solutions Architect, Andy Crocker. Andy, go ahead.
And welcome everyone. Oh, welcome everybody. Thank you, Katie, for that. I appreciate everybody taking time this morning. One of the reasons we're going to talk about Forticlient is because of the scenario and the situation we're in with everyone being on lockdown and quarantined and so many people using Teleworker to get back to the corporate office. And then also a lot of the kids are doing school from home. So because of that, there's a big need of paying attention to what's going on at the home office. Katie, if you would advance the next slide, please. The next slide is kind of funny because basically when you think about protecting end users, and when I say end users, I'm talking about teleworkers and folks that are dialing in from their home office. Obviously on one side you have all your normal security techniques that could be there, firewalls, encryption, antivirus, all that kind of fun stuff. And the other side, in some cases you have Dave. We rely on Dave to provide all the information, all the pertinent protection that may be necessary in order to keep you safe. But the problem is really, can Dave do a great job? And in today's scenario, again, I'm going to keep referring to the fact that we're all in quarantine and we're all working remotely. How do you make sure everything's in good shape? And that's really the challenge. So Katie, if you'd advance the next slide, and it talks a little bit about market trends. Matter of fact, if you go ahead and skip to the slide after that, the first thing that obviously is most important is when you think about the visibility, right? Knowing what's out there, knowing who's connecting and where they're connecting, what they're connecting with, what's on their PC. Matter of fact, if you keep going, the next screen that should pop up there should say that there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there. When people are connecting from home, whether it's bring your own device or they're bringing a device from the office, the question is what kind of applications are they running, and are those applications up to date? It was just this week I was talking to a customer who had some of their end users still running Windows 7. I talked to somebody last week who had end users still running XP. And then it keeps going back beyond that. I mean, are we really aware of what's on those devices? And then obviously the other piece of that, if you fully populate that slide, Katie, is that most all of the attacks occur from individuals who are clicking on things. And let's be honest, folks, I mean, we see something, it looks of interest, we click on it, and the next thing you know, we're in trouble. So obviously that's the challenge that we all face. So Katie, if you advance to the next screen that says integrated threat detections, basically what we're talking about here is having the ability to know when something is bad, knowing when something is malicious, knowing when it's a phishing campaign or a spoofing campaign, knowing not to continually click on attachments that you get or you receive in an email. Having all those capabilities and being able to understand the vulnerabilities there, the risks that are there, you got to be able to understand all that. So Katie, if you advance to the next screen that says Fortinet Security Fabric, in case you're not aware of what Fortinet offers, we have been talking for the last several years about Fortinet Security Fabric. Now, when you kind of break that down and you start thinking about what is a fabric kind of implies that everything communicates, which is great, right? That's a fantastic concept. But then when you layer security on top of that fabric, what does that mean? What that means is whether you're talking about a remote teleworker that's sitting in their home office or in their bedroom or their living room connecting back to the corporate office, or you're talking about inside the corporate HQ being able to eliminate somebody getting in, coming in from a remote office and accessing several organizations or departments within that organization. It's called internal segmentation. I want to be able to block those. I want to be able to control that. I want to be able to pay attention to applications that are in the cloud. Perhaps you as a business have some of your point of sale type applications that are running up in AWS or Azure. You want to be able to monitor that, and you want to be able to protect that. So when you think about the fabric, we're talking about every single part of your organization, whether it's the teleworker sitting in his living room, or if somebody in the corporate office, or somebody trying to access the corporate office. Being able to fully have that visibility and be able to put policies in place to be able to protect all of that. That's really what the security fabric is all about. Now, if you go a step further, let's zero in a little bit closer to the teleworker standpoint. And really, we're talking about three basic concepts here. Number one, the visibility. Again, whether it's a corporate-owned device that you're taking home and working in your living room or your bedroom or your home office, understanding what that is and knowing what's on that device, but then also being able to control what they're having access to, which is really that application control. And then going beyond that to start talking about having the security features in place, like the antivirus, sandbox integration to be able to identify those 0-minute, 0-day threats that are out there. The anti-exploits, in other words, stopping the phishing attacks and all the other stuff that may be occurring. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on for just a few minutes today in my portion of the time. So Katie, if you go to the next slide, it's this Forticlient components. The first element is what we call our fabric agent. The fabric agent is really what sits on that device, on your device as you're sitting at home. And the things most important, excuse me, is knowing where you're connecting to. Know what applications are on that device. Knowing what applications may be outdated. And we'll give some examples of that here in just a moment. And that's called the fabric agent because it communicates up to the firewall, which is above that. And then if you go a little further up and click on it again, the next area is called secure remote access. And that would be whether you're using SSL VPN, IPsec VPN, whether you're using single sign-on, multi-factor sign-on, having that capability of making sure who is connecting to what. And that's really the point there. And then if you go again, the next step is the third step is that endpoint protection. Again, everybody talks about the antivirus, having the ability to identify those viruses, having the ability to identify the malware that may be trying to come in, doing some web filtering to make sure they're not going to places they shouldn't be going. Those are the components that we really need to talk about. And if you advance that slide, Katie, what you're going to see is a big box on the right-hand side that talks about those three things: endpoint, and that includes Internet of Things. It includes the secure remote access, which again, that goes back to the IPsec or the VPN tunnels that you may be building using single sign-on, the multi-factor, and then of course providing that protection on top of that. That's really what we're talking about. And then if you go to the next slide, it kind of digs in a little deeper in terms of the fabric agent itself and what we're specifically referring to in terms of the quarantine, the vulnerability, the application inventory. And then when you go again a little further down to the fabric agent use case, when we start talking about the visibility, there's a lot of people running Adobe that opens up PDF files. There's a lot of people running other types of applications that may be very, very old. There's been a number of times when I've talked to customers and they're running applications that are literally 5 years old. They've never upgraded them or kept up with the latest versions. Those are vulnerabilities. Those are opportunities for cyber criminals to get in and to be able to find out exactly what's there, to access it, and then start moving laterally through that VPN back to the corporate office. That's why it's very important to stay on top of those patching. And then also knowing what applications and what versions of those applications are out there. So having that capability of being able to see that, understand that, to be able to control that. And when we talk about patching, we're talking about something that can be done immediately or scheduled, or work with that end user to make sure those patches are done when they should be. And on the right hand of the screen, it says Fabric Ready, Fortinet Fabric Ready. That refers to our Fabric Ready Partner Program. And what that means is basically, if you don't have to run Forticlient, you can be running Carbon Black, you could be running SentinelOne. There's a number of other, there's about 65 other companies that are part of our program that's called Fabric Ready Partner Program. And what that means is they fully integrate to this Fabric concept. So they basically going to do the same thing that Forticlient's going to do, but at the same time, you don't have to uplift everything over to the Forticlient. We can fully integrate those other companies and other endpoint protections into our system, which works very, very well. And then moving on to the next slide, and Katie, you should be on the one that says endpoint vulnerability. This is an example of what we're talking about with the vulnerability. You'll see down on the left-hand side a list of several different users and their devices that are remote devices. And you're going to notice that they're color coded with different vulnerability specs, whether it's critical or low. You're going to be able to see exactly how many are of a critical nature, high nature, medium, and low. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see the top 10 vulnerabilities that are listed. So you know exactly what they are and how many hosts. Now, you can actually click into that and see exactly what's going on from that standpoint. Now, if you go to the next screen, what you're going to see is the vulnerability name. So these are all the vulnerabilities that we at Fortinet and our FortiGuard Labs service, which is our threat research arm, have identified as being severe or critical vulnerabilities. And you can see the category, whether it's an operating system or just a browser, maybe it's antivirus. You can see the kind of how it breaks down. But the point here being is having that capability of identifying what's running on that system, especially since everyone's being home office right now. And then if you go a step further to, to the next one, another screen is going to pop up in the middle, because in this point, I've clicked on the Firefox SVG animation remote code execution. And in this case, I've got 3 users, and it identifies exactly who those users are, when it was last seen, when it was scanned. So again, you're getting that real-time type information that's showing you. And then the next slide talks about the risk visibility in the network context. So from a FortiGate perspective, now keep in mind in this scenario, we're talking about using the Forticlient that is connecting back to a FortiGate in the corporate office. That builds your secure VPN access. And in that scenario, what we're talking about is somebody can access in, let's say, an admin or security guy within your organization goes into the FortiGate, he can look at the physical topology and he can drill all the way down, even being remote user, even you guys that are teleworking from home, he can see where you're connecting. He can understand what vulnerabilities you have. I mean, everything's going to be listed, everything right there for you. Makes it real simple to be able to identify that. And then if you go to the next slide, Katie, it says security rating. And that security rating, again, we're looking at the FortiGate, which is the corporate office that you're connecting to. And what we're seeing here is we're giving you that list of those issues that we may be seeing out there, whether it is a malware that's been hit or some antivirus, or maybe it's a vulnerability. We're giving you that full visibility of everything that may be occurring. Again, makes it simple from an administrative standpoint to be able to know who's connecting, where they're connecting, how they're connecting, and that type of information. So let's talk a little bit about automation, which Katie is the next slide. So when we talk about automation, now we've been talking about the possibilities of being malware on your device, viruses on your device, some kind of phishing or spoofing activity, anything that could be possibly occurring. One of the things that becomes very apparent is how do I react to that? Obviously, since we're all quarantined at home and probably nobody's sitting in the corporate office monitoring this, hopefully there's an admin that can access the FortiGate from his home office. They're able to actually build what's called automation stitches. Now, a stitch is simply an if-then statement. If I identify a compromised host, what am I going to do? Well, as you'll notice on the screen, it says I'm going to quarantine that device. And by quarantining, meaning they can still get directly to the internet, they're just not going to be able to access back to the corporate office or to the data they perhaps need to do. Now, there's other things you can do, like auto patching. If we identify, hey, you've got an issue with some application you're running that needs to be patched, then obviously you can execute that auto patch and be able to do that. So the automation just makes life easier for everyone, and especially admin, and protects you guys and myself that are all working from home, which kind of makes really a big deal. Now, if you go to the next screen, it talks about dynamic access control. Now, the next couple of screens have some automation that are occurring here. Now, you're going to see at the bottom, you got Kate, you've got Jenny, and you got Jack. They're all accessing different organizations within, or different departments of that organization. Now, first of all, if you hit the key there, Katie, you'll see that each one of them, and as they're teleworking from home, Kate has direct access to the engineering. She doesn't have access to sales and finance because she doesn't need to be. She just needs to be in engineering. Same with Jenny and Jack. They have their specifics. Now, if you hit it again, what you're going to see is perhaps maybe Jenny gets a vulnerability that's occurred. Okay, wow, that's bad, right? So what's going to happen, and Katie, if you keep hitting the button, what you're going to see is that that's going to notify EMS, which is the system that manages the clients, right? So the EMS is going to notify the FortiGate. The FortiGate is going to go, oh, this is bad. Okay, Kate, you did have access to engineering, but because of this vulnerability or because of whatever happened, I'm actually going to block you. You no longer have access. You can still go to the internet, but you're not going to have access to the internet or to the engineering intranet, I should say. Now, if you keep looking a little further, let's say, and if you keep pressing the button there, what happens is, let's say Katie moves out of engineering, moves over to the sales organization. Well, what happens is obviously that configuration change is made via AD or Active Directory. It's updated within EMS. The FortiGate is updated. So now when Katie gets connected to the internet, not only can she go to the internet, but she no longer has access to the engineering intranet, only to the sales because she moved into that organization. Again, this is kind of the control we're talking about, is having that ability to keep everything in perfect order and people accessing only the data they need to access, which is really the most important piece. And now if you go again to the next slide there, Katie, you're going to see that you have an unknown user. Well, that unknown user is not set up to have access to those intranets, to those specific parts of the organization. That unknown user, with the bring their own device, they're using their own device to connect. They can connect to the internet, but they're not going to get into the corporate office, which again gives you that level of detail and protection that they will not be able to get in. So when you think about it, kind of moving a little deeper, we're talking about defense, a proactive endpoint defense. One of the things I think it's important to point out, Fortinet has the largest database of antivirus signatures in the world, primarily because we formed what was called the Cyber Threat Alliance back when the company started. There's a number of companies, somewhere around 65 different security companies that are part of the Cyber Threat Alliance, that we share those antivirus signatures. So when it comes down to identifying some virus, typically all of our devices, all of our software, including the mobile line, is updated immediately. When it's updated, then obviously you get that benefit of having that, being able to stop that virus from growing and being distributed. Same with the malware. We have a huge database, and our FortiGuard labs continually update all that database of malware, of exploits. We have a huge database of our web filtering that could be any number of things, and those could be applied directly to that Forticlient. So basically what that means for you guys being teleworkers is, based on the web filtering policies that are put in place for that client, you may or may not have access to certain things. A good example is, in personal example, I enjoy smoking a cigar occasionally. One of the things that we have done at Fortinet is we put a policy in place. One of the characteristics, or one of the web filters, is tobacco. If I'm connected to our corporate office, I can't go look at cigar websites to buy my cigars. because that is one of the web filters that's in place that doesn't allow me to go there. That's just one example of the web filtering that could be in place. So again, very, very powerful from that perspective. Then when you think about the proactive endpoint defense, again, mitigating vulnerabilities, blocking the malware, and everybody on the call knows malware is growing at a rampant rate and continues to grow. So having that ability to identify those and to stop them is huge. And then we already talked about the automation that's part of it. That's huge when you start thinking about it. And then when you think about detect and block malware, we've already kind of been talking about this. One of the things that I would be amiss if I didn't bring up is this concept of machine learning and artificial intelligence, something we've been doing since for at least the last 15 years. And it's something that we take an average of 10 billion samples a day, and we do a lot of analysis that we can understand exactly what's occurring, and we can identify that very quickly and be able to respond to that from a malware perspective and from any exploits that may be out there. The sandbox integration is another very important piece. The sandbox, if you're not aware of, is a isolation. So we can take an anomaly that we don't have an answer or signature for, and we can actually put that in the sandbox and exploit it to be able to identify exactly what's going on and provide a signature back to that individual. The next couple of slides are just talking about the sandbox integration. So you're going to see enhanced sandbox integration slide that kind of talks about, in this case where I've got something that was a high risk, we didn't have the signature right then. We send it off to the sandbox, and within a few seconds, that sandbox delivers a response or a signature back. And then next slide also talks about an individual by the name of Andrew. By the way, that's not me. I don't live in Canada. So in this case, this is where a file was blocked because the sandbox determined that it was bad. And then the last slide on the sandbox integration, again, talks about how that signature gets pushed out all the way through the network. A couple of use cases, excuse me. The security fabric is a big deal. We're, as far as I know, the only company that offers the security fabric, which means that we can see everything that's occurring. And we, again, as we talked about earlier, we go across the full spectrum of your connectivity. We integrate with not only with all of our products, but with other third-party products. And then, of course, the automation is a piece of that. And in this case, this was an online market that needed that capability. Now, I mentioned earlier about secure remote access. So secure remote access is where you can use single sign-on or two-factor authentication. So obviously, that's a big piece of what we want to be able to offer. And Katie, if you'll fully populate that slide, that little blue area at the bottom, what we're basically saying, especially if you're using FortiToken, FortiToken can be something that's on your phone. I know we use that here at Fortinet. So when I access some of our corporate resources back in Sunnyvale, most of the time when I connect, I put in my user name, my password, and then it's going to ask for a token. It's on my phone, and it simply pops up. I say, yes, I approve this request. It populates that field, and it allows me access. Again, that gives you a lot more security from accessing those corporate resources. It's something I would encourage you to think about if you're not using today, especially with everybody being teleworker, to look into using that at least a single sign-on, if not two-factor, using a token, because that, again, gives you that much capability. If you look at the next slide, it talks about an auto dealership with a lot of employees, a lot of locations, and basically they needed the ability to protect their end users and protect their corporate things that were most important. So obviously the biggest thing they did is they deployed Forticlient. It gave them that capability across the board. There's another dealership, if you go to the next slide, that did the same thing. It talked about the Forticlient Fabric Agent having that single sign-on, having the token, which is the multi-factor, being able to use the FortiManager and FortiAnalyzer to be able to provide reporting. Again, everything we've talked about is really the emphasis there. And then on the centralized management with EMS, I know that looks like a spaghetti slide, But basically what it talks about, the EMS is our management system, enterprise management system that actually is what is the brains behind the Forticlient. The Forticlient can stand alone, but with the enterprise management system, what it does is you can set policies on the enterprise management system and push them out to the client. If you need to upgrade a client, if you need to change a policy for a client, whatever the policy may be or scenario may be, you can actually do all of that from the enterprise management system. It's a simple system, very easy to operate, and just highly scalable to a number of things. So kind of summarizing here, endpoint visibility, endpoint protection, the automation, and simplifying the whole management system. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about the Forticlient, and especially in today's world with all the teleworkers going on. Now, just a couple quick blurbs about the education, because I think it's important to point out that when you start thinking about well, especially right now, with all the kids having to do online learning, you got to protect them from inappropriate content. I'm sorry, and basically, again, that goes back to the web filtering, and you can protect exactly what's going on. You can keep them from going to inappropriate sites. Maybe they don't need to go to hunting sites or alcohol sites or tobacco sites or whatever, right? So those are the capabilities there. We do work with Google Safe Search. We can allow whitelisting and blacklisting depending on what the necessity is. Again, because everybody's working from home, because the kids are working from home and doing their schoolwork from home, everybody's on the network, and that's important. An example might be the school district in California. As you can see, almost 26,000 students with roughly 1,000 teachers, 40,000 endpoints. Again, here's the point. It's a large school district, but it was an easy deployment and easy use of across the board, both from students and teachers. And it really made a big difference. The next slide, it talks again about that same scenario, large school district. In this case, they purchased the FortiMail, which is our email protection, the FortiClient, and of course our firewalls along that same line. If you go to the next slide, it says web filtering across all popular OSs. This kind of emphasizes whether it's Windows, whether it's Mac, even Android and iOS. In some cases where the kids are home doing their work, maybe they're doing it on Chromebooks. Well, with Chromebooks, it's a little different world, because with Chromebooks, it's really just web filtering, which again is a very, very important piece that we need to make sure everybody realizes that we can provide. And Katie, that's it for me. If there's, I think we're going to take questions at the end.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, we are going to answer questions at the end. So if you have any, questions at the end. So if you have any questions, you can add them to the Q&A portal. And now we are going to pass things over to our CTO, Chris Boykin, to talk about our services capabilities. Chris?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be virtually meeting with you guys during this crazy time in our country. Today, I want to just talk a little bit about FutureCom. My part will be pretty short, just in case you don't know who FutureCom is or what we do. I know we have some people that are on the phone that have worked with us for years, and others who have not really worked with us. So just wanted to give you a little bit of introduction about who is FutureCom. So FutureCom's been around since 1991. So we're going on almost 30 years here at FutureCom. We're headquartered in Grapevine, Texas, and our focus is on cybersecurity, consulting, and cloud. So the 3 C's, as we call them. What I'm showing you on your screen now is what we call our solutions map, which can also be found on our website, by the way. On our website, it's actually clickable, and if you click down to any of the icons that you see on the website, it'll drill down into a more detailed page and show you the solutions that we carry there. It purposefully looks like a network diagram depicting where the various solutions commonly exist in the network, and from the ingress of the network at the firewall all the way down to endpoint devices. FutureCom has solutions in every one of these technology spaces, whether it's a product, a consulting service, or even a managed service. As I stated before, FutureCom prides ourselves on delivering top-notch consulting services with our team of experienced experts. So you might ask yourself, well, why would I need FutureCom for services? Which is a great question, but there's no doubt that in our digital world today, things are fundamentally shifting. Remote users, prolific growth in the data and devices, cloud infrastructure and commercialization are all driving tremendous growth and advances. But with these rapid business, social and technology shifts also comes more security risks. And it's paramount that our organizations continue to be competitive and yet stay within the acceptable levels of risk. So that's where we come into play as FutureCom. Perhaps the most telling sign that we have is that we're outpacing our ability to manage these digital risks. And the current shortfall in the skilled cybersecurity practitioners is a huge part of this. Only 62% of organizations, actually 62% of the organizations say that they're currently understaffed and trying to fill positions in cybersecurity. And it takes typically 3 to 6 months for people to even fill those positions, if they can even fill them at all. Some of you are probably in those categories of that 62%, where you are short-staffed and have no way to provide the services that you need internally. And if you look at the future projections, I mean, if you believe what the experts say, in just 2 years from now, we're going to have a shortfall of nearly 2 million qualified cybersecurity professionals. So it's important when you run the numbers, it becomes really clear. We can't solve the growing complexity and risk equation by just throwing more brains at it. Right? There's just not enough people out there that are getting certified and getting up to speed around this. And so again, this is where FutureCom can help. And then lastly, just the need for efficiency. With the increasing complexity of all the solutions that are out there and everything that changes on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, all the new technologies that are coming out, the fact that time is of the essence, right? And that we have all these resource restraints, right? It just makes it that much more difficult for us to resolve risk faster, with hardly any resources. So that's where we come in as FutureCom, because this is what we've been doing for almost 30 years now. What I'm showing you now on the screen is our services portfolio. These are just a sample of some of the things that we offer our clients and the types of services that we can provide, from identity and access to compliance help, for implementation of all kinds of different products and solutions that are out there on the market today, some that you probably already have or considering buying. And that's not an exhaustive list. This is an ever-changing list. As we gain more skills, then we have more ability to implement more solutions. And then, of course, on the management and audit side, right, we provide staff augmentation. We can provide security solutions, of all different types, networking solutions, performance solutions of all different types. And this is where our expertise lies. As part of our consulting services, we provide networking or cybersecurity services all day, every day. This is the team that I happen to run as the CTO of the company. And this is from design and architecture to regulatory compliance, best practice consulting. And what we're looking for, what our clients come to us for, is how can we be more efficient, and how can we get the best bang for our buck and be the most secure we possibly can without affecting the end user. And so this is what we do as our consulting practice. And then we have some very specific, auditing type of services or helpful type of services that we offer, like firewall assessments, health checks, site surveys, assessments of different kinds, whether it's regulatory or not, all fall into our services. And then we have a handful of managed services as well. We have a human security program, which is very popular with our clients, where we actually provide the phishing, vishing, those kind of testing methodologies to see how well their humans react to cyber threats. And as part of our program, we provide web-based training. We also provide in-person training and a whole slew of other things that go around there that basically are focused on helping our clients, end users, become more secure and reduce their security risk. And then, as you see, there are a litany of other managed services like managed email, managed endpoint, managed security solutions like your firewalls and things like that. So if you're in that category of the 62% that are understaffed and you just can't find the right people, this is potentially an option for you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Katie.
All right, guys. Thank you, Chris. That concludes the presentation portion of our webinar. We're going to go ahead and go to the questions and answer those with our speakers. If you have any additional questions throughout, please feel free to add those and we'll continue along. All right, so the first question that we have, guys, is any thoughts on remote patching of our security appliances? Historically, we've had physical access in case of emergency, but in some situations that is no longer available.
Andy, just make sure that you unmute before you get going there.
Yep.
Toss that one.
You there, Andy?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute my phone. I had my phone muted as well. Yeah, I mean, remote patching, that was the question?
Yes. Any thoughts on remote patching?
Yeah, I mean, that can be done. And that's, again, part of what the capability of the Forticlient with the EMS is that they can be upgraded and patched remotely. You can schedule it. You can do it on demand. However, you know, there's a number of different options there that you could use.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question here. Are there any differences between Forticlient's web filtering app firewall as compared to the related features on FortiGate?
No, it's the same set of web filters. So the web filtering actually originates from FortiGuard Labs. They're the FortiGuard Labs maintains those web filters. And there's a number of different categories that could be there. And that could be customized. You could use what's there. It's very, very specific, and it's exactly the same ones across all the Fortinet products, whether it's a FortiGate, FortiClient, FortiMail, I mean, on and on the list goes. They're all the same list of web filters.
All right, thank you. Okay, I also have, will I need to add additional licensing to my FortiGates to fully utilize the features of FortiClient?
So yes, the telemetry license would be something you would have to add if you don't already. But other than that, the FortiClient, typically if you want to deploy the FortiClient, you would purchase the number of seats that you would use for FortiClient, purchase also the EMS system, and then that's going to automatically connect, and you wouldn't have to add anything to the FortiGate if you're using that. But telemetry is, if you're just using the FortiClient in and of itself, you'd have to have the telemetry license.
Okay, thank you, Andy. We also have another question here. What options are available related to endpoint compliance checks for SSL VPNs?
Not sure I understand the question, because when you talk about, I mean, you can use SSL VPN, you can use IPsec VPN. Not sure what exactly the question is involving, because it can go either way.
Okay. Maybe if that person has a follow-up question, they can add that.
Yep.
Okay. Does or can the FortiClient suspend application execution while waiting for FortiSandbox results?
Yes. And that's one of the things that it'll do, is that it is a don't allow this to execute or move forward or do anything else until the sandbox deems it as clean.
Awesome. Okay, we have, all right, it looks like it has regarding the SSL VPN question, regarding doing an, I'm probably going to say this wrong, OWASP scan or otherwise confirming the end client meets the policy requirements to join the VPN?
Yes. So obviously that was part of what we, if you remember part of the slide where we showed Kate having access to a certain intranet, that's part of what you can set up with the SSL VPN is what is that individual allowed to access and how are they allowed to access it? Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Andy. Let's see, we have a couple more questions here, everybody. What is the source of the vulnerability data used by the endpoint vulnerability scanner, and how often are new vulnerabilities added to the scanner's database?
So again, that goes back to FortiGuard Labs, and FortiGuard Labs is, I don't want to use the word minutely, but I mean, literally every minute they're keeping things up to date. And it depends on the settings within Forticlient as to how often that is updated, but at the very least, once a day, at the very least. But it could be a lot more often than that.
Okay, great. Looks like we've got a question here for FutureCom. How can FutureCom provide assistance with evaluating or installing the features discussed?
Yeah, so good question. Yeah, so FutureCom, this is one of the solutions that we do have expertise in, the whole Fortinet line, actually. So if you are a current Fortinet customer, or you're thinking about it after this webinar, you know, and the things that you've seen, wanting to do that, then all you have to do is reach out to us, and Katie will provide information. If you're already a client of ours and working with us on this, then you know, working with us at all, then you probably already have an account manager assigned to you. So you could just reach out to your account manager. But Katie will provide contact information to everyone who attended at the end if you have anything you would like to discuss around this. So we can do the installation, the configuration. We can help you manage the solution as well. So any of those types of options are out there for the Fortinet solutions through FutureCom.
Awesome. And yes, to Chris's point, following the webinar, there will be an email that goes out. So you'll have the ability to reach out. If you don't already have a FutureCom account manager, then there's a contact information for you to reach out to us to discuss that or anything you heard today. And I think I have one last question here. What applications does anti-exploit protection apply to?
Pretty much anything that's out there. If anybody, and here's maybe a way to answer and also a little bit of a challenge, and that is if you have questions about what all can we do, there's a website called FortiGuard.com, and there is a extensive, very extensive list of well-known applications. Probably the only exception be if it's a homegrown application, and if it is, get in touch with us. We can work with you on making sure we have the information there to prevent the exploits from occurring. We have, and keep in mind, guys, we have over 300 people that are part of our FortiGuard Labs that are continually doing the research and the analysis. So it is a continually growing scenario where we're always on top of all the applications that are out there that we're aware of, and we continue to do the analysis on each one. Again, it goes back kind of that, as I was talking about earlier, the machine learning and the artificial intelligence. That's really what we do. That's what we built our business on, and we continue to do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. So I don't have any more questions. It looks like we've answered everyone that we've got in on the portal. So I just want to thank our presenters again, Andy and Chris, for their time today and the material that they presented for us. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to your account manager at FutureCom, or as I mentioned, we'll send out some contact information post-event. And you should be receiving your DoorDash gift cards through your email that you registered with. It typically arrives within that inbox within an hour, but due to high demand, it might take a little bit longer. So hopefully you can get it in time for a nice Friday lunch today. But if you have any issues with that, feel free to contact me on the information that's sent out on the invitation that you guys received. You can always reach out and contact me if you have any issues with that. But we want to thank you again for your time today, and we hope that you have a great lunch.